When are the one-score losses going to end? When is it going to change? When is it going to happen? Kansas loses another one-score game, this time against Cincinnati.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Thanks for joining us on a little bit of a venting session version of Locked On Jayhawks. Kansas falls to Cincinnati 37-34. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show, and thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're making it your first listen or checking out some of our other shows throughout the day. It was a rough game for the KU defense, and hero ball from Jalon Daniels, almost enough in the end, but Kansas loses another one-score game. They're now 1-8 in their last 9 games in one-score games, 1-6 dating back to last year, which would be a number that would be even worse. If Kansas doesn't give up the late touchdown to Missouri, then it would be even another touchdown worse because they would have lost that by 1 score because the late touchdown that ended up being a 2-score game. So we're going to break down the defensive issues, the offensive success, actually, for KU, some of those issues in the 1-score loss, and more on today's episode of the show. It just feels frustrating that Kansas cannot win one of these 1-score games because they, like, realistically, Kansas has built themselves up to be a good enough football team and program that if you start claiming some of these 1-score games, you're going to have some really fun seasons. You're going to have some really special seasons. And instead, you're coming off a 5-7 season, and now you're sitting at 3-2 where you look up at it, and it's not a guarantee you're going to make a bowl game. I mean, the most winnable game left on the schedule is probably Oklahoma State. Like, you have coin flip games with, at this point, UCF and Kansas State, tough ones against Texas Tech and Utah and Iowa State, and we'll see how good Arizona is and stuff like that. But it's a team that I expect to make a bowl game with Kansas based on, the talent they have and some of the good things that they've shown. But that almost makes it more frustrating because we went into this game saying, if you are a true Big 12 title contender in a year where the Big 12 felt wide open, right? Texas Tech looked really good so far this season. But outside of that, it's like, who's that other team? Is it TCU? They lose to Arizona State. Is it Arizona State? I mean, they've had to take some fourth quarter heroics. Like, we could go through the teams and stuff. But point being, you were starting to convince yourself with the way Kansas was looking in their blowout wins over West Virginia and Fresno State, and how, even the loss to a good Missouri team on the road. Could this be a team that at least contends, that at least flirts with making Arlington and making it to the Big 12 championship game? And I said all week, if that is true, you win this game. You beat this team at home. Cincinnati's a good team, but you win this game at home if that is true. And I think we found out today, Cincinnati is closer to that being the case, to being a team contending to Arlington, than Kansas is. I expect both these teams to be bowl teams. I expect both these teams to, at least win 6 or 7 games. But there's a difference there with what Cincinnati is. And yes, it is a coin flip result in the end, but guess what? That is the Big 12. It is built off coin flip results. You're going to have the occasional blowout win, but if you want to succeed, if you want to have a 9-10 win special season in the Big 12, you have to execute. You have to win your 1-score games. BYU last year wins double-digit games. They go like 5-1 in 1-score games. Iowa State, they go to the Big 12 title game last year. They kill it in 1-score games. Arizona State goes to the college football playoff. They kill it in 1-score games in the Big 12. Versus you look at a team like Kansas last year, Utah, both teams who failed to make a bowl game because they struggled in 1-score games. And yes, some of that can be flaky year to year. It can be fluky. It can be something that doesn't carry over. Other times, that's not the case. Like, go look at what Nebraska has done in 1-score games over the last, 5-10 years. It's been an issue for them consistently, and it feels like Kansas, it's trending in that same direction, that they just can't come through with the 1-score wins. And it's different seemingly in every game. Like, in some games, it's the defense. You think of this game, you think of the at West Virginia game in the final 4 minutes last year. Sometimes it's the offense not being able to put the drive together. Sometimes it's maybe a special teams mistake. It's a game management issue. And that almost makes it more frustrating that, like, you can't even just pinpoint it to say, hey, if we could just, maybe if we just blitz more on defense in those key moments. It's everything in those key moments. And it's very frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating for Lance Leipold and the players, right? Because it feels like you were a better team than your record is. 3-2 is not a bad record. We went through many seasons where we would have killed for Kansas to win 3 games in a season. But with the talent you have, with what you have developed as a program, it just feels like there's meat left on the bone right now. And so, yes, in a vacuum, you could say, okay, it's not a big deal. Cincinnati looks like a pretty good team. You lost a coin flip game. But when you keep doing that seemingly every other week the past 2.5 years, it starts to wear on you just a little bit there. And it feels like in this one, it was about the defense. I know people are probably going to want to point to the fumble by Jalon Daniels at the goal line. And yes, that was a very big play. It was one that you would hope Jalon Daniels doesn't make again. Here's my thing. Bleep happens. Bleep does happen. You don't want the bleep to happen, right? Ideally, that wouldn't have happened for KU. Kansas made a stop right after that, went down and scored. Are we not allowed like one or two mistakes? Like Jalon Daniels outside of that fumble was pretty perfect in this game. So yes, he had the bad fumble, whatever. This game was not lost because Jalon Daniels was 19 of 28 for 445 with 4 touchdowns, man. He had 55 rushing yards. That was second on your team. And Cincinnati ends up in a game where, I mean, they came into this one 6th in the Big 12 in sacks. So like they were, above average at it. They only get 1 sack. Big part of that was Jalon's mobility. Jalon Daniels played more than well. The offense for KU, you have like 600 yards of offense. You played more than good enough to win this football game, even despite that fumble in the goal line. You played more than good enough to win this game. And again, that doesn't mean you were perfect. You had the fumble at the goal line. You had a couple drives that were stopped in the red zone. I'm not saying it was a perfect game from the offense. I'm saying it was more than a good enough performance that you should win that game 10 out of 10 times. When your offense has 597 yards, and yes, 1 bad turnover, but it's only 1 turnover. It's not like you have 5 turnovers. You should win that game 10 out of 10 times. The KU defense could not make a stop in this game. Cincinnati was 6 for 6 in the red zone. They had 603 yards of offense. They did whatever they wanted. And once again, those end of half situations, and you can point to the end of the first half, you can point to the end of the second half, where Kansas does not execute at the best level possible. You look at it, and the end of the first half, Kansas goes from having the ball down 17-13 with a chance to say, hey, hopefully worst case, you're down 17-13 at half, getting the ball in the second half. Ideally, you're getting at least a field goal there. It's 17-16 at half, or even better, you're getting a touchdown. Instead, it's Cincinnati going down and getting a field goal. And similar to the Missouri game, you give up a gigantic chunk play on a running play where the other team is basically saying, you know what? If we don't get much yardage here, we're just going to run the clock out for the end of the half. And they go, oh, look what we found. I mean, and that just kills you. And those extra 3 points. Hey, what do you know? Kansas loses by 3 points, right? If you don't give up that field goal at the end, that touchdown by Cincinnati at the end, okay, it's the forced overtime. It's at least a little bit of a different situation there. And so it is just frustrating too. And it's also, I think, frustrating when you've seen moments where you've seen the Kansas defense look really good. I think where I'm at with that is to say, because in the Fresno State game, the West Virginia game, the Wagner game, the KU defense has looked like, bar none, the best defense in the Lance Leipold era. The KU defense in the Missouri and the Cincinnati games, and I would say even more so for this game, has looked more like the 2021 or 2022 defense that they've had at Kansas. And at least in the Missouri game, like you can point to the fact that like Kansas actually was pretty good on first and second down for the most part in the Missouri game. It was just you couldn't get off the field on 3rd and 4th down. To be clear, you couldn't really get off the field on 3rd and 4th down in this game either, but it was also an issue on 1st and 2nd down, even more so than that Missouri game against an offense in Cincinnati that I think is pretty good, but I don't even think it's as good as the Missouri offense, and you're at home. And so I look at this one, and it's just the defense couldn't make a stop. I mean, you couldn't cover them. You couldn't cover them. We talked all offseason about the losses of Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson and how impactful was that going to be, and could they cover it up with scheme and with a better front seven? And I think we found the answer to that is no. Kansas's coverage is going to be a problem this year. And I think part of it is something you hope gets better. I mean, do keep in mind there are a lot of young players in that back end for Kansas. So you would think, you would hope that they're going to get better as the season goes on. They're going to get better as they get more experienced and seasoned with KU. But right now, it's a problem, like in a very big way. Like, I don't know, do they have one of the worst secondaries in the Big 12? It certainly is a real conversation after this one, in which Cincinnati finished up with 388 net passing yards for a team that didn't even have 100 passing yards against Nebraska. Now, Nebraska, very much different defense, and that was the first game of the season. You get better as the weeks go on in Cincinnati, but that is, I mean, Brendan Sorsby has had 3 career games before today with 300 or more passing yards. He had 388. And only one of those 3 was against a Power 4 opponent. Well, make it 2 now because Kansas couldn't stop them. And, yeah, man, this is far from a Big 12 title contender. I still think it's a solid enough team. I still think they should have some more good moments and more good wins. But also, if you can't win one-score games, which they've continued to show here, how many more wins are there on the table for KU? Let's get to our game awards and stats of the game, plenty more. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda, and Mazda is moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, it's hard coming off a loss. It really is. But I don't know, pick one of the two long ball touchdowns, Emmanuel Henderson. They weren't really long. I guess one of them was, but most of them were just Emmanuel Henderson getting wide open, making a catch, and then boom, bunch of yards after catch. Like, I'm just faster than you, and boom, I'm going to hit my head on the goalpost. Like, really good game from Emmanuel Henderson and Jalon finding him. And when you follow what moves you, you don't catch him if it's Emmanuel Henderson, unless you're in a Mazda. The unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back on Monday for more takeaways from the game. Sad, man. Especially for all the fans out there. I mean, it was a hot one. And weather in the storm, get the late touchdown, you're thinking they're going to win, and then you get to 4th and 10 as well. And that's the other part of it too. It's like you get another game where it's like you felt like you had the interception in your hands. That one not nearly as bad as the Rich Miller one against K-State, but certainly hurts very similarly without it, being your rival. Okay, game awards, stats of the game, moments and plays of the game. I mean, if we're looking at the KU moments and plays of the game, I think you could pick one of those two Emmanuel Henderson long touchdowns. The first one of the game, you get a three and out on Cincinnati, or I don't know. Did they get one first out? Whatever. They punt on the first drive. And then Emmanuel Henderson on the first play, 93-yard touchdown. And it's like, oh, Kansas is just going to pick up right where they left off against West Virginia. They're golden. They're good to go. And then things were not as great from there on. But then starting the second half, when it's like, hey, you're down 20-13, feels like you can't get a stop. What is the offense going to do? They go out there, another big play to it looked like an RPO. Jalon throws the dart over the middle, Henderson off and running. Those are the plays again of the game. If we're talking about the bad plays of the game, the plays that maybe lost you the game, I mean, the targeting call obviously didn't hurt. That was such a soft targeting call. If we're going to give a game award, the softest targeting call of all time to that call on Bengali Kamara, which I don't know if it changed Cincinnati getting a touchdown there or not, because I want to say they ended up getting like a holding call and then still got like a touchdown or something. So I don't think it would have changed that, but it certainly would have changed helping to have Bengali Kamara in the game the rest of the way. And again, it was not a good game for the KU defense. And even when Kamara was in there, the KU secondary was getting torched. And, Bengali Kamara can be in there. He can be out of there. It doesn't matter if your corners and safeties aren't covering the guys. But I don't know. It might have been the difference. It might have helped. It might have changed something for KU. Maybe it does in some way or another, but that was lame. But that was a important play in the game, certainly. And then the Jalon Daniels fumble at the goal line. Like I said, it's not his fault they lost, but that was a certainly very unfortunate one there. And then there were a couple fourth downs that Cincinnati was able to convert in this game that you could point to. Really, each and all of them. I mean, they go 3 for 3 on fourth downs. There's also a couple like third down and longs they converted that of the game, but certainly the 4th and 10 when they're down 34-30, you would point to that. You get one-on-one coverage with DJ Graham, who didn't really have a great game, and their receiver smokes him and makes the play up the left side, and then from there you're unable to kind of make the stop. Our stat of the game in this one, I mean, it's funny because I want to point to Cincinnati had 603 yards. Like, that's the reason they lost. And I'm sitting there just being like, but Kansas had 597. Like, why did they lose? 29 first downs for Cincinnati, 26 for Kansas in the end. And this is the other thing. Kansas averaged 10.9 yards per play. Cincinnati at 7.4. I would love to see a stat. I don't know. Maybe somebody, while I'm recording this, has already posted it out there. I would love to see a stat of teams' records when they average over 10 yards per play. I mean, that is an unbelievable number for KU. That is like such a ridiculously good number. The fact that they didn't get it. I guess maybe the stat of the game you could say is, I don't know. I mean, like, you out TFL'd them 3-2, 1-1 in sacks. It's just the fact of what they were able to do, I guess, on those key downs, on those third and fourth downs. Like, you look at late downs, Cincinnati had 19 late down situations. Kansas had 10. So when you look at it from that perspective, you would say Cincinnati had double the late downs as Kansas. You would think in theory, right, if all things are being equal, the fact that you're forcing them to more late downs, even if they have a couple more they convert, the fact you're forcing them into them gives you a great position. And the fact that you were not able, so EPA, expected points added, Cincinnati on late downs, 11.75 at 0.62 EPA per play. Kansas was at 3.19 expected points added on late downs with 0.32 per play. So they got double the late down attempts as you, which would make you think, okay, we got them to the down we want them to. Can we just get off the field? And in the end, it wound up actually being a big plus for Cincinnati. So that is probably our stat of the game. Awards for this one, I'm faster than you. That'll go to Emmanuel Henderson. 5 catches for 214 and 2 touchdowns, running behind the defense. This dude's a stud. KU found their all Big 12 receiver on the outside, and Henderson is certainly pacing to be that first KU receiver to hit 900 yards, I think, since I can't remember if Steven Sims got there, but certainly KU hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since the Desmond Briscoe days. And let's see, he's at, with the inclusion of his big game today, 214. He, as well as he's played to start this year, he had 221, so he almost doubled his yardage today, but over 400 receiving yards through the first 5 games of the season. So he is on pace right now to get to 1,000 yards, and certainly he was a lot faster than the other guys. I think sometimes you end up with games where, you look back on it and you're like, why didn't they get more touches? I think that happens more in like basketball where like, why didn't he get more shots? Le'Shawn Williams, that felt like a game where he should have carried the ball more, right? Your defense is struggling. And again, I feel silly nitpicking the offense. They were more than good enough to win this game, but I don't know. Is there a part of me that's thinking, hey, your defense was so bad. Like, do you do a little bit extra in a very hot game to try to possess the ball just a little longer? And Williams was good. 10 carries for 64 yards. Like, could you have done that a little bit more? I don't know. Again, that might be nitpicking a little bit here, but I thought he did play well. The forgotten hero of the game that's going to be forgotten after KU loses this game, Boden Groen, man. He had, and maybe you could say Keaton Quebeca. He had the big third down reception from Jalon Daniels, or maybe a second down, like after the holding call or whatever. He had that catch. He had 3 catches for 53. But Boden Groen, so Deshaun Hanukkah gets hurt in the early going of the game, and you hope he's all right. But Groen has 5 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown on all 5 of his targets. He's been, I think, really impressive for KU in the passing game. And I don't want him to be forgotten because he played well enough for KU. And then diamond in the rough, or I guess what would be like the opposite of turd in the punch bowl? Like, you think of turd in the punch bowl, like the turd ruins the whole punch bowl. Would it be punch in the turd bowl? I don't think it works that way. But point being, like, the KU defense was the turd in this game, and the punch was Blake Harrell. I thought Blake Harrell actually had a good game for KU. Obviously, it didn't, translate to the whole team for the Jayhawks on that end of the field. But he had 5 tackles. He had 1 sack, 1.5 TFLs. He had the lone sack of the game for KU. He had a pass breakup and 3 quarterback hurries. I thought that he had a really good game for KU on the interior, but unfortunately, you were unable to take advantage. And honestly, like, the best way, as I'm looking at the defensive stats right now, you don't want, like, the years that, like, remember when like Fish Smithson was like leading the country in tackles and stuff, and that was great for Fish Smithson. Like, good on you for making those plays. That is not a good thing for a defense overall, because that means they're getting to the last level a lot. That means Fish Smithson is forced to make a lot of tackles, and they're picking up 8, 9, 10 yards of play, and he's having to make the tackles as the last line of defense. You don't want that to happen. And I look to this game where the KU DBs struggled, where they gave up a lot of plays at the back end, and I'm looking at the top tacklers for KU. Among the top 5 tacklers, one of them is Trey Lathan, finished second with 9 tackles, 2 QB hurries. The other 4 are all defensive backs: Lyric Rawls, Jalen Todd, Taylor Davis, Austin Alexander. That doesn't mean that all of those guys had a bad game. Certainly, I think you would just say as a whole, the secondary had a bad game for KU. But the fact that your defensive secondary, okay, so let's see, as a team, KU had 74 tackles. You're getting 30 tackles from just those 4 DBs. And then if we add in, like, Saeed Gibbs had 2, DJ Graham had 2, Devin Dye had 2, Jalen Dye had 1. So you had 37 tackles. Half of KU's tackles in this game came from the DBs. I have no idea. Is that like a normal? I wouldn't think so. I would think a majority of your tackles come from the front 7, but that feels like a high number to where it just kind of shows what Cincinnati was able to do in terms of completing a lot of passes, and you struggling to get off field on key downs, and the defense just not being good enough to win this game. Let's give out our game balls. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by DoorDash. And you know what? If you just want to sit in at home all the rest of the day and sulk about this one and order some DoorDash, you deserve it. It is the weekend. Let's look back and crown this week's MVP on who delivered. Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. You know what? Let's give it to the offensive line. We've talked a lot about some of the other people. I mean, at the end of the day, Cincinnati finished with one sack. They finished with just 2 QB hurries. They finished with just 2 tackles for loss. KU was able to move the ball very well on the offensive side of the football. They had 445 in the air. They had 152 on the ground on 5.6 per carry. Good game from the KU offensive line. So they certainly moved the KU offense forward. And just like the KU offensive line delivered for the Jayhawks against Cincinnati, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day, only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients, with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. And they're super portable. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere, get that boost when you need it. You know, there's a lot of good college football games on today. If you're watching this on Saturday before all these games come on, Penn State and Oregon, Alabama, Georgia, you might be, feeling that low after the KU game. It was hot out there. Maybe you're weathering down. Maybe you're up early watching the Ryder Cup. Well, maybe you need that little boost of energy. Enough with the boring, flavorless caffeine. Time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade. Do that with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com. That is 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Again, back at you Monday to get to our biggest takeaways of the game and get to our GOATs of the game. On Tuesday's episode, we're going to talk more about a little KU basketball. Stick around, as if Talon Kinney picks KU, we'll talk about that. If he doesn't, then we'll sulk about that too. It could be a bad weekend, or hopefully at least a bittersweet weekend for KU based on what happens there with Kinney. All right, our game balls. I know this isn't as fun when they lose the game, but at least shows you, I don't know, still they're valiant efforts by players that I think deserve being talked about. Jalon Daniels, man. I know, again, like there's probably some people that are sitting there going, oh, he fumbled at the goal line and that was a big play in the game. Again, you made a stop after that. You went down, and when it was nut cutting time, you're down 30-27. You delivered. Jalon made the plays possible to put you in the lead. And again, you would have liked to have more points on that drive, but that's the unfortunate thing about what happened with the defense in this game. The defense required Jalon Daniels to be perfect. And Jalon Daniels, instead of getting a 100% on the test, got a 95, and that's what happened here. But you get 445, 4 touchdowns, no picks, and 55 yards rushing. He deserves a game ball. Emmanuel Henderson gets the other one, 5 catches, 214, 2 touchdowns. I also liked, we got to see that play where he lined up as running back, going back to his high school days. He had a 4-yard run to the outside on that one. Again, probably should have given one to the offensive line, but here we are. Our defensive side of the ball, do I have to? I guess I mentioned Blake Harrell. Blake Harrell deserves a game ball for the defense. 5 tackles, 1.5 TFLs, 1 sack. And not a good game for the KU defense. He was good for KU. So round of applause for him. You know what? I'm going to give one to Bengali Kamara. I know he got ejected from the targeting. Again, that was the softest, lamest targeting call I can remember from at least watching KU football. And Kamara was having a good game before that. Again, it wasn't always translating the KU defense, though he did have some big plays on the first stop of the game against them. But he was making some big plays in the run game coverage, and you can't tell me it didn't have at least a little bit of impact on how the rest of the game went. So I thought he was having a good game before he got knocked out. So and it also sucks that he I don't know, it puts you in a position in a hot game where it's like you're already going to be testing your depth, and now it just tests that even more. So I do think I'll give Bengali Kamara, even though it's only like a quarter and a half worth of action, the defensive game ball. Our special teams game ball, we're going to go with Leif Marjan for this one. KU wasn't able to get any punt returns off. They only had the 1 kick return for 20 yards. Finn Lappin has had some really good games. This was just a mediocre game for him, just 43 yards per punt, which, funny enough, that actually would have been a good game for some of KU's past. But Leif Marjan, 2 for 2 on field goals, made all his PATs, long of 35. it wasn't anything that jumps off the page, but there wasn't really anything in that area for KU. And certainly that moment of the game where Cincinnati returned that punt, it felt like, thank goodness that there was a holding back, but I guess in the end, it didn't matter. All right, we're going to be back on possibly Sunday, at the very least Monday, to talk biggest takeaways from the KU football loss to Cincinnati. Have some more time to kind of debrief, rewatch the game, think through everything like that. But frustrating, to say the least. Still a talented team, still a team that I think is going to win some games. They have to figure out the one-score game issues. And I don't know what the answer to that is. Is it blitzing more late? Is it you're playing too much prevent? Is it you're doing something wrong offensively? Is it something you're doing with the clock? Is it not being aggressive enough here? Is it using your timeouts at the wrong spot? I'm not entirely sure. I think probably a little bit of a lot of different things. KU's been outscored 64-15 in the final 2 minutes of the first half, dating back to last year. That continued in this game. Then you give up a touchdown late in the second half as well. You have to figure it out. Otherwise, this stuff's not going to change for KU. I don't totally have the answer, but you have to figure it out, and that's why they're being paid the big bucks. But, certainly a sad Saturday for KU as they fall to Cincinnati, 37-34. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe. See you next time for another edition of LOJ.